God calls us to pursue what is good and take responsibility for our choices, yet we cannot guarantee where those choices will lead. So, how can we work towards good outcomes while still trusting God with the future? This week on Reverberate, we explore the difference between faithful responsibility and a sinful grasping for control. Last time we talked through our appetites, our desires, what we find satisfaction in. And we talked a little bit about pursuing control of things. And I kind of wanted to maybe dive a little bit deeper in that. A drum you've been beating is fighting against our desire for control. But isn't any time I pursue good an example of trying to influence outcome? And God's called us to make responsible decisions. Isn't anytime I try to wisely make a decision, push forward some agenda, some goal I have, isn't that an example of trying to exert control?
What I would say is, let me press that even further. There's times in the scriptures where you have God's commands towards us with a view to their outcomes, like even be fruitful and multiply, or have dominion over the creatures, these kinds of things, which very much is a responsibility with a view to a particular outcome. However, the difference between, let's say, a sinful kind of control and, let's say, if we're going to use the word control rather than influence, that's appropriate, the difference there would be in understanding that in one, let's say, in the good and positive kind, you are exercising responsibility because you're a creature made after the image of God, in the image of God. So we plan, we work, we make decisions all the time, every day. In fact, more decisions than we can even count. And then demanding like guaranteed outcomes as the price of acting at all, or even like in the second case, in the sinful case, where it turns into sinful control is where you try to eliminate your dependency and contingency at all. So for example, you have God blessing Adam and Eve in the garden, right? Be fruitful and multiply. And someone might go, well, that's before the fall. Okay, then we go to Noah and he receives the same blessing and instruction to be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth, these kinds of things. So we see that, again, a commandment with a view to its outcome is in place. But something remarkable happens as you begin to read the Old Testament in Genesis. People unable to have children, okay? And you find these phrases of God being the one who opens or closes the womb, right? And unfortunately, there's good, godly Christian couples today where they read Genesis, they think they're married, they've been married for 10 wonderful years, and they think this is a natural outcome, and this is a good thing. They're reading the Psalms, and they're thinking, I want arrows in my quiver, right, to shoot out into the world, and they're barren, right? Someone who is operating under a sinful control will be very tempted to say, who wants kids, who acknowledges even as a good thing and as kind of the normal pattern and rhythms for marriage. And it turns into a family of just more than two under the blessing of God even. It's a good thing. It's described as a good thing in Scripture. All of a sudden, the thoughts come in, this is meaningless. This is pointless. Their life itself might be, as it were, like stripped of meaning and value and those kinds of things. And we might wrestle with, why is he withholding this blessing, right? This good gift, in our blessing and these kinds of things, a gift from the Lord. But on the other hand, one says, I'm going to sow into my marriage. I'm going to be faithful to love my spouse. I'm going to be faithful to continue to cultivate, let's say, romance or what have you. And even though we have this kind of general blessing from God to be fruitful and to multiply, that's still in God's hands. And so and I think that's a wonderful example, because even when you have promise of the outcomes, like in sharing the gospel as an example, or you have commandments even with outcomes in view, like you're doing this because you want them to be saved, and a part of it, yes, you're enjoying the marital act, right? But you're also saying, I want children. But even in those cases, you never have, if you will, a situation under the sun where you're God, and where that's not, as James says, if the Lord wills.
Well, that's an interesting example because you have Abraham and Sarah and Hagar.
That's
They
right.
had a direct promise
That's right.
that a descendant would come, but then they still tried to take control of the situation
Hmm.
and all the aftermath of that. But yeah, that's a really interesting example.
And I think it really is. And I do got to be careful, because we have to be sympathetic towards people who are seeing the connection between commandments and promises and even outcomes. So, for example, we do plan to have a good job, to make good money, to provide food. That's not an unwise connection. It's not like you're just looking at the labor with no. So if you're hearing this, don't think, oh, I can work anywhere, even if there's sin involved in it, or let's say it's not actually providing me with sufficient means. No, that's not the point. And in that sense, yes, you can exercise self-control and make better, more wise decisions regarding where you're seeking employment. But, and that's what's striking about this to me, even when God's like, hey, you have responsibility here, and this tends to be the outcome, let's say, and you have certain promises attached, don't think this is like an off and on switch. Sometimes we flip on that off and on switch, and guess what happens? The light doesn't turn on because that's the fragility of life. And so much of what wisdom is involved in is recognizing the ordinary way things actually operate in God's created order, and even in especially now in a fallen created order, so that even when God is commanding us to do things with certain outcomes in view that he brought up, not us, we still have to tread with reverence and fear and say, God, bless this work. Bless this work. And I think if someone say, why is it that way? I think because we're not God, and God wants us to remind us of that. But I don't think that's in a mean way, a sadistic kind of mean way. I actually think this is an invitation to a relationship with a God who is the provider and giver of all good things.
I think that I do beat this drum of control. I use that word a lot, and it is helpful to clarify specifically, because there are questions people go like, I do want to make sure this thing happens. Sure. And even there, when I say it, we have to carefully look at the wording to make sure, like, no, actually, I don't make sure anything happens. We use that language a lot, but it's not really sure if it's in the future. If it's right this moment, I move my hand and I'm fairly confident in that, sure. But you say, I need to make sure that my children are independent and capable when they leave the house. I want to do everything I can for that goal, yes. But I do not make sure, ultimately, that, because literally sure would mean I would know the future and I could guarantee it, and I can't. That's what part of what I mean when I say control. I think one piece of this is we are creatures who live in this present moment. I cannot guarantee the future. I can try. Even when you asked earlier, you said, if I pursue good, is that trying to influence an outcome? And is that control? It is trying to influence an outcome, sure. That's not the only purpose for doing good. You don't only do good so that the outcome happens. You do good because it's good, but you do desire a good outcome, so sure. Trying to influence an outcome, though, is something that I do in the present. Right now, I have the capability of influencing the outcome. You used a job example. You say, I'm going to go get training. I can't guarantee that I get the job I want, but I'm trying to influence in the present something. I can do that. What I can't do is live in the future to guarantee the outcome. And again, it's making sure we are seeing ourselves as creatures. There's a great quote from a commentator. He said, we all long to be gods with a little g and superheroes, but the universe wasn't made to contain that. It was made for creatures. We live in a moment. We don't live in eternity in that sense. I don't live in the future. So if you think pursuing good is about doing what you can in the present, that is morally good, that fits with God's character, and pursues the kind of outcomes that God would want. Yes, but it's pursuing, not guaranteeing. You use some examples. I thought of some other cases, like Ephesians says, let no corrupt communication come out of your mouth, but such as builds up. What if you say edifying things and that brother is not built up for whatever reason? They can't hear it right. They misunderstand you. They whatever. Did you do the wrong thing? No, because you're pursuing an outcome that they would be built up. That's the outcome that God holds in front of you, the kind of things that do this. But he doesn't tell you, guarantee that they are built up. He tells you, pursue the influence right now that leads towards that, assuming everything works that way. Or live at peace with all men as much as lies within you. So don't guarantee peace. You can't. But do what you can to influence. Yes, that's not control in the sense that I'm using it, at least in Ecclesiastes. That's trying to, in the present, pursue a certain thing. I was also struck when you were saying that God does. This could feel a little despairing. You could feel like, so I could do all kinds of good things and get all the bad outcomes. That's encouraging. Thanks a lot. Like, that's not what,
right.
But what we have is Galatians 6, where he says, don't grow weary in well-doing, for in due season you will reap. Now, the implication in all of that, he says, you could grow weary. It is possible that you could do good. You could plant the seeds, to use the gardening metaphor. You could plant the seeds, fertilize them, water them, weed them, do all the stuff. And you get 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and like nothing is growing. What's the point? And if that person says, the whole point of why I'm doing all of this is to guarantee the outcome, and the outcome's not here, forget it. I'm just going to walk off and leave it, not do anything. That's what we tend to do. We have this fear and anxiety when we're living at that moment where we've been doing the right thing. But what we're told is, even though I can't guarantee a specific outcome, I can't guarantee this person's built up, I can't guarantee we have children, I can't guarantee this job is mine, I can't guarantee the outcomes, but we are told, don't grow weary in doing good, for in due season you will reap if you faint not. So he gives us this like overarching promise. Pursuing good does in fact bring good outcomes. Not every outcome the way you want it, not every outcome at every moment the way you want it, but we are given this overall optimism, even though we're also told right now, if you live trying to guarantee that, you will find frustration, you'll find meaninglessness, you'll find all of these different things.
Which is very Ecclesiastes-esque, and that's what makes it difficult, that there seems to be times within this book, and how he mentioned in Galatians, in the Bible, like really everywhere, Old New Testament, where you get these warnings, like, okay, you plan, you can do this, and it might not amount to anything, but you get these general promises or statements where, and even the way that God seems to bless us as his people, where it's like, yeah, this is rewarded in the long haul. And in fact, when Jed was speaking about that verse, what struck me just now about it is how it both showed how what we do can legitimately be connected to reward or outcome, but we're still not in control, because you want in due time, but whose due time? Not always yours. So if I'm trying to pour into a relationship, and let's say, in fact, he even brought up strive to be at peace with all people, so far as it is in keeping with you, that kind of thing. In fact, I've been in situations where I was doing that, and I actually was discouraged because I thought it was amounting to nothing. But then, as I didn't give up, it turned out not every time that's happened, but then without giving up, that peace was the result. And so it's quite interesting that even when we have these, I think that's a wonderful promise. Hey, don't give up. If you're discouraged, if you're tired, if you're weary, keep going. Like God says, you're going to reap. You're going to reap if you don't give up in due season. But even then, it also reminds us, not necessarily on my timing, and not necessarily all the ways I would expect. So to use that, the seed, let's say you planted 100 seeds. All 100 might not spring up, but you were someone who sowed the seeds. So something will spring up. Some 30-fold, 60-fold, that kind of idea, 100-fold. So I find that remarkable. And that's another example, like the Genesis command/promise, where you have moral instruction tied to outcome, even like with that in view. But when we're applying that practically to our lives, it's not this, now you're God and you say grow, and it grows. What a wonderful picture to say that. You're like a farmer. You're like a gardener, dependent on all these other factors. But you go back to the beginning. I love doing this. Maybe if you've been listening to the podcast, you recognize that I love doing this, pointing back to Genesis. But we're not like God. Why? What's one of the ways we can prove that? Okay. We plant and we got to wait. And then the growth's not from us, right? We influenced it. We were part of the means that God used to bring that about. But when God says, let there be light, there's light. When God says, hey, these waters divide, they divide, and so on and so forth. So it's very clear that in all of this, we're contingent and dependent even as we go forward.
Well, and think of Hebrews as Hebrews 11, the example. You get to the end of that chapter, and some were killed.
Yeah, that's
they
right.
did not receive the promise. You say, wait a minute. What happened? These guys trusted this great promise and had these incredible, miraculous things, and these people got torn in half? What? Really? But that, in that context, is, again, they pursued good. If you were standing alongside one of those martyrs, were you supposed to conclude, see, this outcome was bad, they must not have been doing good things? No, you were supposed to say they were absolutely pursuing good. And the physical outcome was not what they wanted, though they were trying to influence a good outcome.
That's right.
And did not get it. But that's where Galatians 6 starts with, don't be deceived, because it's easy to be deceived by that. Don't be deceived. there is this long-term optimism of pursuing good does in fact result in good outcomes. Now, in due time, sometimes in eternity.
Yeah, that's right.
So
Amen.
you have to stretch all that out. But there is long-term optimism along with truly pursue what's good right now.
And I'm glad that you said that, because we are very tempted to think right now is more real than then.
Sure.
That how can you say that? The pessimist can say, how can you say that if look at the results now? But God continually says, but look at the results then. And that's where it really counts.
Yeah, we've been already addressing this, but just to state it. So Ecclesiastes 7 says, "Consider the work of God, who can make straight what he has made crooked. In the day of prosperity be joyful, and in the day of adversity consider, God has made the one as well the other, so they may not find out anything that will be after him. In my vain life I have seen everything. There's a righteous man who perishes in his righteousness, and there's a wicked man who prolongs his life in his evil doing." Like I said, we've already addressed this, but I guess if someone comes up to you and says, if I can't control the outcome, I'm trying to do good things, and I feel like good things aren't happening. And then they read this verse, and it's, oh, a righteous person's going to perish, and a wicked man's going to prolong his life. What's even the point? Why do I keep striving? I'm depressed, and I feel like I just can't keep going because there's just no point. How would you encourage them?
I think, first of all, I would say the overall message is not just whatever happens will happen. The overall message is genuinely pursue good and trust God with the future. Both pieces. You can't minimize that to trust God with the future and simply be lazy and inactive. No, pursue good. That's an intentional, active term. Pursue something. But as you pursue it, trust God. And he tells you, I think this, one of the things Solomon, he's brilliant. He's sometimes hard to follow, but he's brilliant when he says there's the day of prosperity and the day of adversity. Consider God has made the one as well as the other. God gives you life with ups and downs. Why? So that man may not find out anything that will be after him. I think what that means is God is extremely invested in the fact that you don't think you're God, so you don't think you know all the future or even know any future. We are present creatures. That's what we are. We're not future creatures. We live in a moment. We live in the present. And I think it drives us, like, we really want that. But think about the other way around. If you knew all the outcomes, it would make God a briber, really. That's the point of Job. The accusation Satan makes towards God is Job only follows you because you bribe him, essentially, right? And with our kids, we don't do that. When I ask my kids to do something around the house, it's not good parenting practice to every time you say, clean up your room, and if you do, I'll give you ice cream. You could do it sometimes, right? But that's not good. None of us think that's a great plan. We want kids who can only do a good thing if they see an immediate, tangible reward. Now, we want to be good parents, and we may well know we want to give them something good, but no, I don't want you to have the kind of character that has to be bribed to do anything. I want you to do what is truly good and trust my goodness. And that is the opposite end of this. I either trust myself for control in the future and find that fails miserably, or I trust God for his goodness. And I would say again, for his goodness. If you think of it only as, I trust God for his control, he just dispassionately does whatever he wants, and sometimes it stinks, and sometimes it's good, and who knows what's going to come, but he's in charge. Yeah, you're never going to like Ecclesiastes' message, if that's what you think. But we're not contrasting, here's a God who doesn't care about us at all, and he just puts adversity and prosperity and whatever, that's it. Or I can try to trust myself, and that doesn't work. Might as well just forget it all, right? And that's not the contrast. Trust myself for goodness. I'm going to guarantee the future, and I find that it's frustrating. Ecclesiastes says, because God makes sure that is frustrating. And I don't want to overstate that, but I also don't want to not say it. God makes sure, as part of the message of Ecclesiastes, God made prosperity and adversity so that if you try to control, and I don't mean influence, not if you try to influence your outcomes, but if you try to control, to say, I'm going to guarantee on my strength, these outcomes happen. Ecclesiastes says God makes sure that won't work consistently. It might work sometimes. Some outcomes happen. But not every outcome's going to happen. And he does that so that you won't think you're God, and you'll be driven to say, I want to trust God for his goodness while I pursue what's good. So I would tell that person who says, essentially, if I can't control the outcome, then what's the point? I would tell that person, number one, absolutely no one can control the outcome. So that's not even a valid option. And two, I would say trusting God's goodness really is better. It really is better than trying to control the future, to control those outcomes. Pursue good, influence, yes. Plant seeds, yes. But live in that present. What can I do now that's good? That heads toward the outcome. I was thinking about a really sad example of doing this the wrong way. It's a little unrelated, but I think it gets to it. There was this trend, and still exists, where people try to predict specific dates when Jesus is going to return. And sometimes they do this very cult-like thing, and they tell all their followers who are convinced, stop going to work, sell all your stuff, just don't bother with any of it. Just forget the present, because tomorrow, I know what's going to happen tomorrow, right? And there have been a lot of really sad stories in that, right? What that advice is telling you is, if the future outcomes aren't going to be influenced by what you do anyway, forget it all. That's not what Scripture would ever say. And I would say, if I knew Jesus was returning tomorrow, if I knew that with confidence, I don't think it changes what I should do today. Pursue what's good. You go home. Might go home and cut my grass. Why? Because it's good. Have dominion. It's a good action. Like whatever it is that you say, this is a good thing for today. I don't have to know what happens tomorrow or next year to make this good right now. I say this is a good thing. Maybe it pursues an outcome. Maybe it tries to influence an outcome, but it's still a good thing right now. Christianity is not about ends justifies the means. It's not, here's an outcome that's a good outcome, and if I just lie a little here, I'll get the good outcome. See, if we're only driven by controlling outcomes, that might actually be the most likely way to get it to happen. But that's not what we're supposed to do.
Two things came to my mind. When someone's in that place of discouragement and grief, and they're like, what's the point? And they're thinking about how, okay, I can do all of this and it wouldn't matter to change things. That's a very hard place to be, because you've already thrown in the towel. But I would probably remind them, like he said, of God's goodness, and just remind them that's a real thing. We have things like this in Lamentations. And remember, this book is called Lamentations. Chapter 3, for the Lord will not cast off forever, but though he cause grief, he will have compassion, according to the abundance of his steadfast love, for he does not afflict from his heart or grieve the children of men. And so that's quite a remarkable statement. And when you couple that, especially with what the New Testament reveals about God's good purposes and our suffering, essentially when we get to the New Testament, is that Paul expects for the value system of Christians to be such that whatever they're going through, the trials, the difficulties, is worth what God is bringing forth in their lives through the means of suffering. But if you're a person who values wealth, comfort, ease, all these other things more than, for example, conformity to Christ, or even being able to have a patient and long-suffering spirit, if your value system is there's other things better than that, I've been long-suffering enough, give me that other thing, then you can almost, like literally, you can't be comforted by the words that are meant to comfort you. Because words that are meant to comfort a suffering people in the New Testament are like, hey, you're going to be more like Jesus after this, essentially. But if that matters so little to you, you're going to be like, so what? I don't care about that. You know what I mean? And the thought that came to mind when I first began thinking about this question was how, for the right thing, a man can sell everything he have and buy a field, right? Because there's a treasure surpassing value in there. Under different circumstance, if he doesn't believe what's in that field is worth that, that is the loss of everything. But all of a sudden, if what's in that field is of more value, is to be more prized, then it's like a no-brainer for him. It's like, why wouldn't? And so we have to value the things of the Spirit, the things of eternity, the things of the soul, the things of like righteousness for righteousness' sake, more than all these other things. Now, it's not that we're to devalue those things. Let those things be valued as much as they should be, but not more than they should be. And then the last thing in connection with things like Lamentations chapter 3 is, not only do you have passages like this, that the picture is not an almighty ruler in heaven like, ha ha ha, and he's just kind of playing with us like little toys, making a little hell on earth and he's just getting his grand old kick out of it, but wants to bless his children and he has compassion towards you. And we have so much in the person of Christ to see this, that when he was here, he wept at the tomb of Lazarus. He was able to be entreated. He was able to be touched with sympathy. He was moved. We have a high priest who knows what it's like to be tempted. And so he's able to help us in our weaknesses. And so what I would say to that person is go to the throne of grace to obtain mercy and find grace to help in our time of need. The Father's there. The Son's there. The Spirit is available. And in time, not always in the way we would want, but in time, comfort will come. Joy again will return. Life and vitality will come. And remarkably, some of those things that we wished for, we're going to see. That's often the case. Now, sure, some people can live lives that are Job-esque. It's just, wow, we got to say that. But that's why then we point to eternity. And the Bible, when it does that, it doesn't go, oh, the glory then is not worth to be compared to the suffering now. It flips it, right? It flips it. It's not worth compared to the glory that shall be revealed to us. That's literally how Paul comforts. And that's why I say our value system. The first thing we need to do is evaluate our value system before we enter those seasons of immense suffering, so that when we do, our souls are ordered and we're prioritizing things in such a way, or even if I can't point to the relationship thing, or I can't point to the external circumstance, because it's literally not there. It's not in the way that I'm wanting it to be. The big things that are enough to comfort the soul are there because God is using this in my life for my good, for my eternal good, and his glory. And that glory that I will be able to participate and share with is not like the suffering can't compare to it. It's going to be like not quite. I like to think about it as like a dream. It's hazy. You had it. You didn't like it. It made you uncomfortable. It woke you up. You had the dream, but you have a great day and it's just minimized because of the glory of the day or something like that. We got to learn to see suffering in that light.
Ecclesiastes teaches us that we cannot guarantee where our decisions will lead, but we can pursue what is good today and trust God with what comes next. But what about the decisions that are already behind us? You believed you were choosing wisely, yet the result was painful. Next time on Reverberate, we look at Ecclesiastes, Little House on the Prairie, and modern ethical systems and ask, does a bad outcome always mean you made a bad decision? We hope you'll listen in.